In a small frontier town, a group of notorious bandits mistake a quiet stranger in a worn poncho for an easy target. Their fatal error becomes clear when the mysterious man's lightning-fast draw leaves 7 men dead before their fingers can even touch their holsters. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The dusty streets of San Lorenzo fell silent as Sebastian Cortez rode into town, his dark poncho swaying gently in the warm desert breeze. The mysterious stranger's face remained hidden beneath the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat, revealing only a glimpse of a weathered face and eyes that has seen too much death. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the empty streets, highlighting the desolation that had befallen this once prosperous mining town. The town's usual bustle at midday had been replaced by an uneasy quiet ever since El Coyote Rodriguez and his gang had started terrorizing the region. Marshal Thomas Brady's badge had lost its shine, much like the man's reputation after failing to protect the townsfolk from the bandits' increasingly bold raids. The once proud lawman now spent most of his days in his office, drowning his failures in cheap whiskey, while the town slowly died around him. Cortez dismounted outside Victoria's saloon, his spurs clicking against the wooden boardwalk. His horse, a magnificent black stallion with intelligent eyes, stood perfectly still without being tied, trained to wait for its master's return. The establishment's owner, Victoria Reyes, watched him through the window with a mixture of curiosity and concern. She had seen too many strangers pass through, each bringing their own brand of trouble to San Lorenzo. But something about this one was different. There was an air of deadly purpose about him that made her skin prickle. Inside, the saloon was half empty, with only a few regulars nursing their drinks in corners. The once bustling establishment had fallen on hard times, much like the rest of San Lorenzo. Old Jack Wheeler, the telegraph operator, sat at his usual spot, his hands trembling slightly as he lifted his glass. The elderly man's eyes darted nervously between his drink and the newcomer, years of delivering bad news making him wary of strangers. The Castillo brothers, Carlos and Miguel, lounged at a corner table, their eyes fixed on the newcomer. Their reputation as skilled gunmen had kept them safe from El Coyote's recruitment attempts, but their allegiance to the highest bidder was well known throughout the territory. "Whiskey," Cortez said quietly, his voice carrying an accent that was hard to place. Victoria poured his drink, studying his reflection in the mirror behind the bar. The stranger's movements were measured and precise, like a predator conserving energy. His poncho concealed his frame, but the way he carried himself spoke of military training. A worn leather gun belt hung low on his hip, the holster smooth and dark from years of use. Doc Sullivan, the town physician, sat nearby, absently shuffling a deck of cards. The old doctor had seen enough gunfight victims to recognize a dangerous man when he saw one. He watched as Maria Delgado, Victoria's trusted friend and assistant, moved cautiously around the stranger, her usual confident stride replaced by something more cautious. The door swung open again, and Diego, the snake Vargas, swaggered in with 3 of El Coyote's men. The temperature in the room seemed to drop as Vargas spotted Cortez. The bandit's hand instinctively moved toward his gun, but he checked himself, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Vargas had earned his nickname not just for his quick draw, but for his tendency to toy with his victims before striking. "Nice poncho, stranger," Vargas sneered, moving closer. "Might want to be careful wearing something like that around here. People might think you're trying to hide something." His men spread out behind him, hands hovering near their weapons. The few remaining patrons began quietly making their way toward the exits, knowing what usually followed when Vargas used that tone. Cortez didn't respond, didn't even turn around. He simply continued sipping his whiskey, seemingly oblivious to the mounting tension. Victoria's hand moved beneath the bar, where she kept a loaded shotgun, while Maria quietly ushered the remaining customers toward the back door. "I'm talking to you, friend," Vargas pressed, now standing directly behind Cortez. The floorboards creaked under his boots as he shifted his weight, ready for action. The Castillo brothers watched intently, their hands resting casually on their gun belts, waiting to see how the scene would play out. In one fluid motion, Cortez turned, his poncho swirling like a shadow. Nobody saw him draw, but suddenly his revolver was pressed against Vargas's stomach. "I hear you," he said softly, "but I'm not your friend." The saloon fell deadly quiet, the only sound the soft ticking of the clock behind the bar. The standoff lasted only seconds before Vargas backed away, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. "You just signed your death warrant, stranger. El Coyote doesn't take kindly to people threatening his men." His men followed him out, walking backward to keep their eyes on Cortez until they cleared the door. As Vargas and his men stormed out, Victoria approached Cortez, her heart still racing from the confrontation. "You should leave town," she warned, her voice barely above a whisper. "El Coyote's gang will be back, and there won't be just 4 of them next time." Cortez finally turned to face her fully, and Victoria caught a glimpse of a silver medallion hanging around his neck. A badge of some sort, though not one she recognized. "That's what I'm counting on," he replied, his voice carrying the weight of a promise that sent chills down her spine. The setting sun cast long shadows through the saloon windows, painting the scene in shades of blood red and deep purple, a fitting prelude to the violence that was surely coming to San Lorenzo. Night settled over San Lorenzo like a heavy blanket, bringing with it an oppressive silence. The local cantina had cleared out early after the confrontation, leaving Sebastian Cortez alone with his thoughts and a bottle of whiskey. But he wasn't drinking, his glass remained untouched as he watched the street through the window's dusty reflection. Victoria Reyes wiped down the bar methodically, stealing glances at the mysterious stranger. The silver medallion around his neck caught the lamplight, and she finally recognized its significance. It was a badge from the Mexican Federal Police, though it appeared to be several years old. The revelation only deepened her unease. "Those Castillo brothers," Cortez spoke suddenly, his voice cutting through the silence. "They're hired guns?" Victoria nodded, setting aside her cleaning rag. "Best shots in 3 territories. They work for whoever pays the most, but lately, they've been staying neutral. El Coyotes tried to recruit them, but they prefer their independence." Outside, old Jack Wheeler hurried past the saloon, clutching a handful of telegrams. His usual nervous demeanor seemed more pronounced tonight. Cortez's eyes followed the old man's progress down the street until he disappeared into Marshal Brady's office. "You're Marshal," Cortez continued, finally turning to face Victoria. "He wasn't always drunk, was he?" Victoria's face hardened. "Thomas Brady was the finest lawman this territory had ever seen. That was before El Coyote's gang killed his wife and daughter during their first raid. They made him watch." She paused, her hands gripping the bar edge tightly. Something broke in him that day. The door creaked open, and Doc Sullivan entered, looking more agitated than usual. "Victoria, you might want to close up early tonight. Just got word from Piedras Negras. El Coyote's gang hit the bank there yesterday. 3 dead, including a child." Cortez's hand tightened almost imperceptibly around his glass. "How many in his gang now?" 20, maybe more, the doctor replied, accepting the whiskey Victoria poured him. "Word is they're gathering more men. Something big is coming." Maria Delgado emerged from the back room, her face pale. "Victoria, the Castillo brothers just rode out of town, headed east, toward El Coyote's territory." The news hung heavy in the air. The brothers' departure could only mean one thing. They'd received a better offer. El Coyote was consolidating his forces. Marshal Brady stumbled in, more sober than usual, clutching a telegram. His badge glinted dully in the lamplight as he approached Cortez. "Wheeler just got this from the federal marshal's office in Mexico City. Says a former federale named Sebastian Cortez has been tracking El Coyote's gang for 6 months. Left a trail of dead bandits across 3 states. The marshal's bloodshot eyes fixed on Cortez's medallion. "That wouldn't happen to you, would it, stranger?" Before Cortez could respond, gunshots erupted from the street. 2 of El Coyote's men had cornered old Jack Wheeler, accusing him of sending telegrams about their movements. The old man's terrified protests were cut short by another shot. Cortez moved like lightning, his poncho swirling as he drew his gun. 2 precise shots rang out and the bandits fell before they could turn around. Wheeler lay wounded but alive, clutching his shoulder. Doc Sullivan rushed to attend to Wheeler while Cortez surveyed the street, his gun still smoking. "They're getting bolder," he said quietly. This was a message. El Coyote wants everyone to know he owns this town. Victoria approached Cortez, her voice tight with anger. "You're hunting him for a reason, aren't you? Something personal?" Cortez holstered his gun, his face hidden in shadow. El Coyote wasn't always a bandit leader. Once he was a corrupt Federale captain, my commanding officer. He betrayed his own men, sold them out to the cartels. I was the only survivor. His hand touched the medallion. "This belonged to my brother. El Coyote made me watch as he executed him." Marshal Brady straightened up, something of his old fire returning to his eyes. "Then I reckon we've got something in common, strangers. Question is, what are you planning to do about it?" "War," Cortez replied simply, turning back to watch the street. "El Coyote thinks he's gathering his forces for a big score, but he's really gathering them for a slaughter." The lamplight cast his shadow large against the wall, like an avenging spirit ready to rain down judgment on the wicked. Word spread quickly through San Lorenzo about the shooting outside Victoria's saloon. By morning, the town buzzed with tension as residents hurried about their business, casting nervous glances toward the wounded old Jack Wheeler's telegraph office, now attended by Maria Delgado in his absence. Sebastian Cortez sat on the boardwalk outside the saloon, methodically cleaning his revolver. His fingers moved with practiced precision over each component, while his eyes constantly scanned the street. Doc Sullivan had spent the night tending to Wheeler's wound, finally emerging at dawn with news that the old man would survive. Marshal Brady, surprisingly sober, approached Cortez with purpose in his stride. "Got 3 more telegrams this morning. El Coyote's men hit 2 more towns yesterday. They're moving in a pattern, working their way here." He paused, studying a crude map he'd drawn. "They're gathering at the old silver mine in Devil's Canyon, about 20 miles east." Victoria emerged from the saloon, carrying coffee for both men. "The Castillo brothers still haven't returned," she reported, her voice tight with concern. "But I heard from a traveler that they were seen riding with a large group of bandits near Rattlesnake Creek." "How many?" Cortez asked, reassembling his gun with swift, precise movements. "At least 30 riders," Victoria replied. "And they're all wearing red bandanas, El Coyote's signature." Brady cursed under his breath. "That's more men than he's ever gathered before. This isn't just about terrorizing the town anymore. He's planning something bigger." Cortez nodded slowly, holstering his weapon. The bank in San Lorenzo isn't his real target. There's a government payroll shipment coming through next week. Enough money to buy an army. His eyes met Brady's. "My contacts in the federal police confirmed it, 500,000 in gold." The marshal's face paled. "How did you know about—" Understanding dawned on his features. "The bank robbery in Piedras Negra. They weren't after the money. They were after the shipping manifests." "Exactly," Cortez confirmed, standing up. "El Coyote always was a meticulous planner. He's gathering his forces not just for the heist, but to take over the entire territory. With that kind of money, he could buy every corrupt official from here to Mexico City." Victoria's hand trembled slightly as she set down the coffee pot. "And San Lorenzo is right in the middle of the payroll route. We're not just in danger. We're about to become a battlefield." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. A lone rider appeared at the end of the street, Carlos Castillo, one of the brothers, his clothes covered in dust and blood. He dismounted awkwardly, clutching his side. Cortez and Brady reached him just as he collapsed. Doc Sullivan rushed from his office to attend to him, discovering a nasty bullet wound in his ribs. "El Coyote!" Carlos gasped, as Sullivan worked to stop the bleeding. "He offered us twice our usual rate, but when we got there, he was executing anyone he thought might be disloyal. Miguel." His voice broke. "Miguel questioned one of his orders. They shot him in the back." Cortez knelt beside the wounded gunman. "How many men does he have now?" 43, Carlos replied, his voice growing weaker. "But that's not the worst part. He's got Gatling guns, 2 of them, and he knows." Rayar Frankheiding Trinant Seis in Narters. Dermaloris teening his lips. "He knows you're here, Cortez. He said to tell you he remembers everything. Said this time, you'll watch everyone die before he finishes you." Doc Sullivan shook his head grimly. "The wound's too deep. Internal bleeding. He's not going to make it." Carlos grabbed Cortez's poncho with his remaining strength. "Make him pay," he whispered. "Make the bastard pay for Miguel." His grip loosened and his eyes glazed over. The small crowd that had gathered watched in silence as Brady and Sullivan carried Carlos's body to the undertakers. Victoria approached Cortez, who stood motionless, staring at the blood on his poncho. "You're not just going to wait for them to come, are you?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "No," Cortez replied, his voice cold as steel. "El Coyote wants a war. I'm going to give him one. But first, we need to prepare the town." He turned to Brady. "Marshal, how many men here can handle a gun?" Brady straightened up, some of his old authority returning. "Maybe 20 who could put up a fight. But against 43 men and Gatling guns? Numbers don't win a war," Cortez said, checking his ammunition. "Fear and surprise do. And El Coyote's about to learn what real fear feels like." Thunder rumbled in the distance as storm clouds gathered over San Lorenzo, a fitting backdrop to the violence that was about to unfold. The town's residents, sensing the approaching storm, both literal and figurative, began boarding up windows and moving valuables to safer locations. The time for hiding was over. San Lorenzo was about to become the front line in a very personal war. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As dawn broke over San Lorenzo, Sebastian Cortez stood in the center of the town's main street, addressing a gathering of 20 armed men. Marshal Brady had rallied every able-bodied citizen willing to fight, though their determination couldn't mask their obvious fear. The morning air was thick with tension, and the metallic smell of gun oil as the impromptu militia checked their weapons. "El Coyote expects to find a town of scared civilians," Cortez declared, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. "Instead, he'll find a fortress. Every street, every building, every window becomes a potential death trap." He gestured to the surrounding structures. "We have one advantage. We choose the battlefield." Victoria Reyes emerged from her saloon carrying a Winchester rifle that had belonged to her late husband. Her face was set with grim determination as she joined the group. Several other women followed her lead, including Maria Delgado, who had proven to be an excellent shot during the morning's hasty training session. "Doc Sullivan has converted the church basement into a medical station," Brady announced, his voice stronger than it had been in months. Sobriety and purpose had restored some of his former authority. "We've stockpiled supplies and ammunition in 3 different locations. If one cache is compromised, we'll still have options." Cortez unrolled a large map across a barrel, weighing down its corners with rocks. "El Coyote's men will likely approach from 3 directions." His finger traced the routes. "Their Gatling guns are slow to move and set up. They'll want high ground, here and here." He marked 2 positions overlooking the town. "What they don't know," he continued, "is that we've already prepared those positions. The previous night, under cover of darkness, Cortez and several volunteers had rigged both locations with dynamite stolen from the abandoned mine. When they move their heavy weapons into place, we'll bury them under half the mountainside." Old Jack Wheeler, his arm in a sling, hobbled forward. "Got a telegram from my cousin in Devil's Canyon. El Coyote's men are drinking heavily, celebrating their coming victory. They plan to attack at dawn tomorrow." Cortez nodded grimly. "Good. Drunk men make mistakes. Now here's how we divide our forces." He began assigning positions, breaking the defenders into small teams. Each group would be responsible for a specific sector of town, with carefully planned fallback positions and escape routes. Victoria approached Cortez as the others dispersed to their positions. "There's something you're not telling them," she said quietly. "Something about El Coyote's real plan." Cortez was silent for a moment, watching the townspeople fortify buildings and string wire across strategic alleys. "El Coyote doesn't just want the payroll," he finally replied. "He wants to make an example of this town. After what happened in his last raid, when that bank teller wounded him, he's become obsessed with showing his power." "How do you know this?" Victoria pressed. "Because I know how he thinks. We were trained by the same men, taught the same strategies." Cortez's hand unconsciously touched the medallion around his neck. "He's not just a bandit. He's a military tactician. Everything he does has multiple purposes." Brady joined them, checking his revolver. "Then why tell everyone about the payroll shipment?" "Because they need something to fight for," Cortez answered. "Hope is a better motivator than fear. But make no mistake, tomorrow's battle is about survival, not money." As if to emphasize his point, a scout rode in hard from the east. "Riders," he shouted. "About a dozen, moving fast along the ridge." "Just scouts," Cortez said calmly, even as the townspeople scrambled for cover. "They're testing our defenses, seeing how we react." He turned to Brady. "Marshal, now would be a good time to show them what happens to El Coyote's men in San Lorenzo." Brady grinned, some of his old fire returning. He selected 4 of their best shots, and they moved quickly to pre-planned positions. Minutes later, gunfire erupted briefly on the outskirts of town. 3 of El Coyote's scouts fell, while the others retreated in disarray. "That'll give them something to think about," Brady said with satisfaction. "But they'll be back." "Yes," Cortez agreed, watching the horizon through narrowed eyes. "And next time they'll be ready for a fight. Get everyone inside before dark. Tomorrow we will paint this town red with El Coyote's blood." As the sun set behind the mountains, San Lorenzo resembled an armed camp more than a frontier town. Barricades blocked key intersections and riflemen watched from shadowed windows. In Victoria's saloon, now converted into a command center, Cortez made his final preparations. Tomorrow would bring either liberation or annihilation, and he intended to make sure El Coyote paid dearly for every inch of ground. Dawn crept over San Lorenzo with an eerie silence. Sebastian Cortez stood motionless on the saloon's balcony, his poncho rippling in the morning breeze. The town appeared deserted, a ghost town waiting for ghosts. But behind every boarded window and reinforced door, armed defenders held their breath. Victoria Reyes positioned herself at a second-floor window, her Winchester ready. "Movement on the East Ridge," she whispered. Through her scope, she counted at least 15 riders emerging from the morning mist. Cortez remained still, only his eyes moving as he tracked the approaching bandits. "They're testing us again. The main force will come from the north, where the Gatling guns have the best field of fire." His hand rested on his revolver. "Wait for my signal." The first wave of bandits entered the town slowly, weapons drawn. Their newfound caution born from yesterday's losses made them move like nervous cats. The Castillo brothers' reputation had bought them this hesitation. El Coyote's men weren't sure how many skilled gunmen the town had hired. Marshal Brady, positioned in the church tower, watched through binoculars as more riders appeared on the northern ridge. "They're moving the Gatling guns into position," he reported through a messenger. "Just like you predicted." Cortez lifted a small mirror, reflecting sunlight twice, the signal. Moments later, 2 massive explosions rocked the hillside. Avalanches of rock and debris buried the heavy weapons and their crews, sending horses and men tumbling down the slope. The bandits in town wheeled their horses around, suddenly realizing they were trapped. That's when the real killing began. Defenders opened fire from every direction, cutting down the confused raiders with ruthless efficiency. Victoria's rifle cracked repeatedly, each shot finding its mark. "El Coyote's not here," Cortez announced grimly, scanning the chaos below. "This is just the first wave. He's watching, learning our positions." As if to confirm his words, a second, larger force appeared from the west, at least 20 riders. led by Diego the Snake Vargas. This group came in hard and fast, having learned from the first wave's mistakes. They threw dynamite ahead of their charge, blasting apart several barricades. The street erupted in gunfire and chaos as defenders engaged the new threat. Cortez moved like a shadow through the fighting, his revolver barking death with every shot. 6 bandits fell to his gun in as many seconds, their bodies tumbling from their saddles. But Vargas had spotted him, and now the bandit leader directed concentrated fire at the saloon. "Fall back! To second position!" Cortez ordered, as bullets splintered the balcony around him. The defenders retreated in practiced coordination, drawing the attackers deeper into their killing ground. More explosions rocked the street, as carefully planted charges detonated beneath the raiders' horses. Maria Delgado proved her worth, picking off 3 bandits who tried to flank their position. Old Jack Wheeler, despite his wounded arm, managed the runners between positions, keeping their forces coordinated. Doc Sullivan worked feverishly in the church basement, treating the wounded as they were brought in. The battle raged for hours, the town's defenders gradually giving ground according to Cortez's plan. Each street became a death trap, each building a fortress that had to be taken at terrible cost. By noon, the bandits had lost over 20 men, with only 3 defenders wounded. Vargas finally called a retreat, his forces withdrawing to the town's outskirts. The sudden silence was almost as deafening as the gunfire had been. Cortez used the respite to check their ammunition and reposition their forces. "They'll come again at sunset," he told Brady and Victoria as they gathered in the saloon. "El Coyote likes to attack at dusk. The failing light works to his advantage." He paused, studying their faces. "But something's wrong. This attack was too straightforward, too obvious." Victoria nodded grimly. "I counted their dead. We got 23 of them, but that still leaves her." Her voice trailed off as realization dawned. 20 men unaccounted for, Cortez finished. El Coyote's keeping his best killers in reserve. This was just to wear us down, make us use up our ammunition. He turned to Brady. "Marshal checked the back of every building. El Coyote's not just a bandit, he's a strategist. He'll have men trying to infiltrate during the fighting." The sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the smoke-filled sky in shades of blood red. The real battle for San Lorenzo was about to begin, and everyone knew the worst was yet to come. As dusk approached, Sebastian Cortez's prediction proved deadly accurate. During the ammunition check, they discovered 3 of El Coyote's men who had infiltrated through the town's old mining tunnels. The bandits had killed 2 defenders before being discovered, adding a nudition of terror to the coming night. "They're in the walls," Brady muttered, ordering a thorough search of every building, like rats in the dark. Cortez moved silently through the shadows, his poncho concealing the extra ammunition belts crossed over his chest. He'd counted every shot during the day's battle. The defenders had spent nearly half their ammunition repelling the first attacks. If El Coyote had indeed held back his best men, the night would be long and bloody. Victoria approached with fresh intelligence. Maria spotted movement in the old granary, at least 5 men. "They're setting up some kind of position." She paused, her face tight with concern. "And there's something else. Some of the bodies we found. They're not El Coyote's usual men. These were professionals, military trained." "Mercenaries," Cortez confirmed grimly. "El Coyote's been recruiting. The payroll shipment is just the beginning. He's building an army." He checked his revolver mechanically. "That's why he needs San Lorenzo. It's not just about the money anymore. He needs a base of operations, a fortress town to launch his campaign." A sudden explosion rocked the north end of town. Flames erupted from the old stables, illuminating the street in harsh orange light. In the confusion, gunfire erupted from multiple positions, the hidden infiltrators revealing themselves in a coordinated attack. "It's a diversion!" Cortez shouted, but his warning came too late. The main force struck from the south, led by El Coyote himself. The bandit leader sat astride a black horse, his silver-trimmed sombrero visible in the firelight. At his command, the remaining bandits charged into town. The battle dissolved into chaos. Defenders fought room to room against infiltrators while trying to repel the main assault. Doc Sullivan's medical station was overwhelmed with wounded. Old Jack Wheeler fell defending the church, taking 3 bandits with him before a bullet found his heart. Cortez moved like a demon through the mayhem, his guns dealing death with mechanical precision. Every shot found its mark, but for each bandit that fell, another seemed to take his place. The defenders' carefully planned positions became death traps as they found themselves caught between the infiltrators and the main force. Victoria proved her worth again, organizing a group of townswomen to evacuate the wounded while maintaining a steady fire on the attackers. Maria Delgado's accuracy with a rifle kept the bandits from fully securing the town's center, but ammunition was running critically low. Brady fought like a man possessed, his past cowardice forgotten in the heat of battle. He personally led a counterattack that cleared the infiltrators from the church, but at a heavy cost. Half his men were dead or wounded, and the bandits still held the high ground. Then came the moment Cortez had been dreading. El Coyote's voice rang out across the battlefield. "I remember you, Cortez. I remember how you begged for your brother's life." The bandit leader sat calmly on his horse, seemingly unconcerned by the bullets flying around him. "Surrender now, and I'll make it quick this time." Cortez's response was a single shot that killed El Coyote's horse, sending the bandit leader scrambling for cover. But the damage was done. The defenders' morale wavered as they realized the personal nature of this war they were fighting. As midnight approached, San Lorenzo burned. The defenders had been pushed back to their last positions around the saloon and church. Victoria's Winchester had fallen silent, her ammunition exhausted. Brady was wounded but still fighting, his left arm hanging useless at his side. Cortez counted his remaining bullets, 6 in his revolver, 4 in his rifle, and 3 spare rounds. Not enough. Not nearly enough. But as he watched El Coyote's men regrouping for what would surely be their final assault, a cold smile crossed his face. He had one last card to play, one final surprise that would either save the town or doom them all. Sebastian Cortez's last plan hinged on something El Coyote could never understand: the power of sacrifice. As midnight passed, he gathered the remaining defenders in the saloon's basement, their faces illuminated by flickering lanterns. "We've lost too many," Brady said, pressing a bandage against his wounded arm. "And we're almost out of ammunition." Around them, the wounded groaned in the makeshift hospital Doc Sullivan had established. "That's what El Coyote expects," Cortez replied, unfolding a worn map of the town's mining tunnels. "He thinks we're trapped, desperate. But there's one thing he doesn't know." His finger traced a path through the underground maze. "The old silver mine doesn't just run under the mountains, it runs under the entire town." Victoria understood immediately. The support beams, they're all original timber, dry as kindling after 30 years. Cortez nodded grimly. "We evacuate everyone through the church tunnel. Then we collapse the entire northern section of town on top of them. The explosion will trigger a chain reaction through the mine shafts." "You'll need someone to set the charges," Brady interjected, "and to hold them off long enough for the others to escape." His eyes met Cortez's. "I owe this town that much." "No," Cortez said firmly. "El Coyote is here for me. This ends where it began, with 2 former federales and a debt of blood." Maria burst into the basement. "They're moving into position, at least 30 men coming from all directions." Cortez quickly outlined the evacuation plan. Doc Sullivan would lead the wounded through the tunnel network to a safe house 3 miles outside town. Victoria and Maria would coordinate the remaining defenders to cover the retreat. "What about the remaining ammunition?" Victoria asked. "Leave it," Cortez commanded. Leave as many loaded weapons as you can spare, but make them think we're still here in force, ain't?" As the evacuation began, Cortez made his way to the old mine entrance. The remaining dynamite, just 3 sticks, would have to be enough. He positioned them carefully at key support beams, using his knowledge of demolitions from his Federale days. Above ground, El Coyote's voice rang out again. "Is this how you want it to end, Cortez? Like your brother, begging for mercy." Cortez didn't respond. Instead, he watched through a crack in the saloon's wall as the bandits moved into their final positions. In the street, El Coyote sat confidently on a fresh horse flanked by his best killers. The evacuation was almost complete. Brady, despite his wounds, had insisted on staying to help cover their escape. He now positioned himself in the church tower, his rifle trained on the street. Victoria approached Cortez one last time. "There has to be another way," she whispered. "There isn't," he replied softly. "Some debts can only be paid in blood." He handed her his brother's medallion. "If I don't make it, make sure Mexico City knows what happened here." The sound of approaching horses indicated the final assault was beginning. Cortez moved silently through the burning town, placing the last of their ammunition where it would do the most damage when the mines collapsed. Brady's rifle cracked from the church tower, dropping 2 bandits. El Coyote's men returned fire, forcing the marshal to duck behind cover. The distraction allowed Cortez to reach his final position. "Come out and face me, coward," El Coyote shouted, his voice echoing through the burning streets. "Or shall I burn every building to the ground?" Cortez struck a match, watching as the flame danced in the darkness. Below him, the charges waited to ignite the timber supports. Above, El Coyote's men were now fully committed to their attack, completely unaware they were standing on their own graves. "Some men," Cortez muttered, "deserve to be buried in the hell they created." He touched the match to the fuse and began counting down the seconds to judgment. The fuse burned slowly toward the charges as Cortez emerged from his position, stepping into the firelit street. El Coyote's men immediately trained their weapons on him, but their leader raised his hand, stopping them from firing. "Finally showing some courage, old friend?" El Coyote sneered, dismounting his horse. His scarred face twisted into a cruel smile. "Or have you run out of innocence to hide behind?" Cortez stood motionless, his poncho shifting in the hot wind from the burning buildings. "You talk too much, Miguel. You always did." His use of El Coyote's real name caused the bandit leader's smile to falter. In the church tower, Brady watched through his rifle scope, waiting for a clear shot. But El Coyote's men had positioned themselves too well, using the surrounding buildings for cover. You remember that day, don't you? El Coyote circled slowly, his hand hovering near his gun. "When you found out what I'd done? The look on your face when I shot your brother." He laughed. "He died crying, just like all the others." Cortez's face remained impassive, but his eyes burned with cold fury. "My brother died a hero. You'll die a coward." His internal count reached 30 seconds. The fuse would reach the charges soon. El Coyote's expression darkened. "I built an empire while you chased shadows. After tonight, every territory from here to Mexico City will know my power." He gestured at the burning town. "San Lorenzo is just the beginning." "San Lorenzo," Cortez replied calmly, "will be your grave." The first tremor shook the ground, subtle but unmistakable. El Coyote's eyes widened as he realized something was wrong. His men began looking around nervously, feeling the earth shift beneath their feet. "Now, Marshal!" Cortez shouted. Brady's rifle roared from the church tower, the bullet striking El Coyote's right arm. The bandit leader's draw was interrupted as he staggered backward. The ground shook more violently as the charges ignited the support beams. Cortez drew his revolver with lightning speed, gunning down 2 of El Coyote's closest men before they could react. The street erupted in chaos as buildings began to collapse. "Kill him!" El Coyote screamed, drawing his own weapon with his left hand. But his men were in disarray as the ground literally disappeared beneath them. The mining tunnels collapsed in a chain reaction, swallowing entire buildings. Brady provided covering fire from the tower, picking off bandits as they scrambled for stable ground. But El Coyote's return fire caught him in the shoulder, sending him sprawling behind the church bell. Cortez and El Coyote faced each other in the disintegrating street, their guns blazing. El Coyote's first shot caught Cortez in the side, but the former federale didn't flinch. His return fire was deadly accurate, striking his old commander in the chest. The ground gave way completely as the final support beams burned through. El Coyote's remaining men disappeared into the collapsing earth, their screams cut short by tons of rock and timber. The bandit leader himself staggered at the edge of a growing chasm. "You've killed us both," El Coyote gasped, blood staining his ornate jacket. Cortez approached his wounded enemy, ignoring the destruction around them. "Some debts can only be paid in blood," he repeated, his gun aimed at El Coyote's heart. The bandit leader laughed, blood spraying from his lips. "Then collect your payment, brother killer." He raised his gun for one final shot. Two guns roared in the night. El Coyote's bullet grazed Cortez's neck, but Cortez's shot struck true, hitting El Coyote between the eyes. The bandit leader's body toppled backward into the abyss as the last of the tunnels collapsed. The northern half of San Lorenzo disappeared into the earth, taking El Coyote and his army with it. Cortez stumbled through the settling dust toward the church tower, where Brady was struggling to stand. "Some of them escaped east," the marshal coughed. 4, maybe 5 riders." "Let them go," Cortez replied, pressing a hand against his bleeding side. "They'll spread the word. San Lorenzo will be remembered as the town that buried El Coyote's dreams of empire." The sun began to rise over the ruins of San Lorenzo, illuminating the price of victory. Half the town lay in ruins, but its people had survived, and in the years to come they would rebuild stronger than before. The dawn revealed the true extent of San Lorenzo's transformation. Where the northern half of town had stood, a massive crater stretched for hundreds of yards, filled with the broken remains of El Coyote's army. Sebastian Cortez surveyed the destruction from the church steps, his wounds hastily bandaged by Doc Sullivan, who had returned with the evacuees. Victoria Reyes approached, carrying his brother's medallion. "The survivors are returning. Those who can still walk are helping to rebuild." She hesitated before adding, 3 riders arrived from Mexico City, federal police." Cortez nodded wearily. "They're here for confirmation. El Coyote's death will create a power vacuum. Every bandit gang from here to the capital will try to claim his territory." The federal officers dismounted near the crater's edge, their expressions a mixture of awe and disbelief. The lead officer, Captain Ramirez, recognized Cortez immediately. "We thought you were dead," he said, approaching cautiously. "After the massacre at the barracks, part of me did die that day," Cortez replied, touching his bandaged side. "The part that believed in mercy." Marshal Brady joined them, his arm in a proper sling. "The bandits who escaped are spreading word throughout the territory. They're calling it the Devil's Grave, saying the earth itself rose up to claim El Coyote." "Let them talk," Victoria interjected. "Fear will keep the others away, better than any army." Captain Ramirez produced official papers. "The government wants to establish a permanent garrison here. San Lorenzo's position is too strategic to leave undefended." He turned to Brady. "If you're willing, Marshal, we could use a man with your experience to command it." Brady straightened, some of his old pride returning. "I'll consider it. But first, we rebuild." The town buzzed with activity as survivors began clearing debris and salvaging what they could. Maria Delgado organized teams to repair the least damaged buildings, while Doc Sullivan converted the remaining section of church into a proper infirmary. Cortez watched silently, his face unreadable. Victoria noticed his expression and approached again. "You're leaving, aren't you?" "There are others like El Coyote," he replied softly. "Men who think their ambitions are worth more than people's lives." His hand touched the empty spot where his brother's medallion had hung. "The work isn't finished." "It never is," Brady interjected, joining them. "But you've given us something worth fighting for again. A chance to rebuild, to make San Lorenzo stronger." The federal officers began documenting the battle scene, recording witness statements and cataloging the dead. Captain Ramirez estimated that over 60 bandits had perished in the collapse, effectively ending El Coyote's dream of empire in a single night. The payroll shipment, Victoria remembered suddenly. It was supposed to come through next week. There was no shipment, Cortez revealed. It was bait. Information I leaked to draw El Coyote out. He was getting too powerful, too cautious. He needed to believe there was something worth risking everything for. Brady laughed despite his wounds. You played him like a fiddle. I played us all, Cortez admitted. The only way to beat a man like El Coyote was to make him think he was winning until the very end. As the sun climbed higher, the first wagons of supplies arrived from neighboring towns. News of San Lorenzo's victory had spread faster than anyone expected, and with it came help. Cortez watched as hope returned to the faces of the townspeople, replacing the fear that had dominated for so long. You could stay, Victoria offered quietly. Help us rebuild. The federales would reinstate your commission. Cortez shook his head, checking his remaining ammunition and supplies. My path leads elsewhere, but San Lorenzo has something better now. People willing to fight for it. He mounted his horse, adjusting his poncho to cover his wounds. Sometimes the best way to honor the dead is to keep fighting for the living. 1 month after El Coyote's demise, San Lorenzo had begun to transform. The massive crater that had swallowed half the town was gradually being filled, and new buildings rose from the ashes of the old. Sebastian Cortez's name had become legend in the territory, whispered in saloons and around campfires. Marshal Brady, fully recovered from his wounds, supervised the construction of the new federal garrison. The skeleton of the building stood where El Coyote's men had made their final stand, a fitting symbol of law's triumph over chaos. 20 federal troops now patrolled the streets, their presence a deterrent to any bandits considering filling the power vacuum. Victoria Reyes had expanded her saloon, adding rooms for the influx of travelers drawn by San Lorenzo's growing reputation. The establishment had become a gathering place for merchants and lawmen alike, its walls adorned with newspaper clippings about the night of the Devil's Grave. 3 more gang leaders turned themselves in yesterday, Brady reported during a meeting with Captain Ramirez. They're saying the ghost of El Coyote haunts the mines, dragging corrupt men to hell. Maria Delgado, now serving as the town's official chronicler, carefully documented each story. The legend grows with every telling, she noted. Some say Cortez wasn't even human, but an avenging spirit sent to punish the wicked. The truth, of course, was both simpler and more complex. Reports filtered in from across the territory of a lone rider in a poncho appearing wherever corruption took root. 2 corrupt judges had resigned after mysterious visits. A cartel weapons shipment was found destroyed, its guards claiming a shadow had moved through their camp at night. Doc Sullivan, tending to his expanded practice, collected these stories. He's finishing what he started, the doctor explained to Victoria. El Coyote wasn't just one man, he was a symptom of a deeper sickness. Cortez understood that. The federal investigation into El Coyote's organization revealed the true scope of his planned empire. Hidden ledgers showed connections to officials in 3 states, all now scrambling to explain their sudden wealth. The corruption was being torn out by the roots, one terrified confession at a time. Brady had refused the offer to command the garrison, preferring to remain town marshal. San Lorenzo needs someone who remembers, he explained. Someone who knows the price of freedom. Victoria kept Cortez's brother's medallion displayed behind her bar, a reminder of the sacrifices made. Occasionally, visitors would ask about the mysterious rider who had orchestrated El Coyote's downfall. She would smile and tell them the truth, that sometimes justice wears a poncho and carries the weight of vengeance in its heart. The town's reconstruction brought changes beyond mere buildings. The people walked taller, spoke louder, unafraid of shadows. The fear that had gripped San Lorenzo for so long had been replaced by quiet determination. They had faced the devil himself and buried him in his own greed. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, a lone rider appeared on the horizon. The federal troops tensed, but Brady waved them down. The rider passed through town slowly, his poncho dark against the dying light. He didn't stop, didn't speak, but those who saw him swore his eyes held the same fire that had turned San Lorenzo's night of terror into legend. He'll be back, Victoria said quietly. watching the rider disappear into the dusk. Whenever the darkness needs to be reminded of its place. San Lorenzo had become more than just another frontier town. It stood as a monument to resistance, a reminder that evil men could be buried by their own ambitions. And somewhere in the territory, a man in a poncho continued his endless crusade, ensuring that his brother's sacrifice would never be forgotten. The legend of the Devil's Grave would be told for generations, but the true story lived in the hearts of those who had witnessed it. They knew that justice sometimes comes not from law books or badges, but from the unwavering determination of a single man who refused to let evil triumph. 6 months after El Coyote's demise, San Lorenzo had risen from the ashes stronger than ever. The new federal garrison gleamed in the morning sun, its walls a testament to the town's rebirth. Sebastian Cortez's legend had spread throughout Mexico, his name becoming synonymous with justice in a land still plagued by corruption. Marshal Brady stood at his office window, watching the bustling street below. The morning stage had brought news from Mexico City. 3 more corrupt officials had resigned mysteriously, each one connected to El Coyote's former empire. Their confessions mentioned a shadowy figure in a poncho. Victoria Reyes entered the marshal's office carrying a letter. "This came for you, Thomas, and federal seal." She placed the envelope on his desk, noting the official markings. Brady opened it carefully, his eyes widening as he read. They found something in El Coyote's personal effects, a journal. He looked up at Victoria. "It details every corrupt deal, every official on his payroll, but there's more. It mentions Cortez's brother." According to the journal, Cortez's brother had discovered El Coyote's plans years ago. He'd been compiling evidence, building a case that would have exposed the entire network. His execution wasn't just revenge, it was a desperate attempt to bury the truth. That's why Cortez leaked the false payroll information, Brady realized. He needed to finish his brother's work. The money was never the target. The men who would come for it were. The town had grown prosperous under its newfound security. Merchants and settlers arrived daily, drawn by tales of the town that had buried evil beneath its streets. The crater had been completely filled, transformed into a plaza where children now played without fear. Maria Delgado's chronicles of the battle had become required reading in federal police academies. The siege of San Lorenzo was studied as a masterclass in strategy and justice, but only those who had been there knew the full truth, how one man's quest for vengeance had purified an entire territory. Doc Sullivan maintained his expanded practice, treating a steady stream of patients who came seeking the healer who had helped save San Lorenzo. Each one brought stories of the poncho-wearing rider, appearing wherever injustice took root. Late one evening, as Victoria closed her saloon, she found a package on the bar. Inside was Cortez's brother's medallion, polished and repaired, with a note. "Keep it safe. Some legacies must never be forgotten." The federal investigation, sparked by El Coyote's journal, had grown into the largest anti-corruption operation in Mexico's history. Each arrest, each confession, each resignation could be traced back to that night in San Lorenzo, when a man in a poncho decided that evil must be buried beneath its own weight. Brady kept a map in his office marking reported sightings of Cortez. The pattern was clear. He was systematically dismantling what remained of the corruption that had allowed men like El Coyote to flourish. Justice wore a poncho and carried the memory of a brother's sacrifice. San Lorenzo had become more than a town. It was a symbol, a reminder that darkness could not stand against the determination of good men and women. The Devil's Grave had swallowed evil, but it had given birth to hope. As the sun set on another peaceful day, Victoria placed the medallion back in its place of honor behind the bar. In its polished surface, she caught a glimpse of movement, a lone rider on the horizon, his poncho dark against the dying light. She smiled, knowing that somewhere in the vast territory, justice still rode, ensuring that the price paid in San Lorenzo would never be forgotten. The legend of the man in the poncho would be told as long as people gathered around fires and in saloons. But the true legacy lived in the transformed hearts of those who had witnessed how one man's quest for vengeance had become a crusade for justice. and how a town's darkest night had given birth to its brightest dawn. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.